we can begin. Everybody's here, so Abhishek can start. I'm gonna turn off my voice, but you know, if there's anything wrong, I guess we'll figure it out.
Okay, so I started. So I start the debate or not?
Yes.
Everybody's fine?
Yes.
Okay, then start. Opening government, here.
Okay. So as a opening government, I am going to talking about the improving representation of people who are lacking due to some high level of inequalities. We know that in Hollywood, in Bollywood, there are many peoples who are in their high position due to their fathers or mothers who has actually worked before going to the before going to the industry. So there are many examples which can you which are set like example like that, because most of the film stars are come from the family of the big film star. So there are some people who come from underprivileged or people who do not have any actual experience of doing this, or having an experience also, but they are actually failed to do this because they do not have any get an opportunity of doing this, even though if they have skills also, but they do not have any actual sources of going there, they will actually going to be fail there. So there are many advantages also if we able to catch this low level background which has underrepresentation, or or we can say which are not able to get into the industry, because if you are able to uh, get these people in the industry, then there will be, I think there will be a lot of more audiences is going to be there. Why? Because I think when a small person like that, like if it is going from the California and going to be a big superstar, so in that area of California, people are actually knowing him, and people trying to go there and watch his or her movies, um, uh, so that it actually going to increase the audiences. And uh, the big problem is arises here, that nobody is going to be felt left, because there are many people who want to be go to the industry but actually felt left because they are actually not getting the uh, equal opportunity. So we have to create a new group so that these people are not be left aside, or people are not feeling left. And actually it is going to be an equal opportunity for everyone, uh, as in democracy also we know that everyone is having equal rights of going there. But if anybody is getting um, more representation from a particular community, and other is not getting an equal opportunity from the committee, then it is going to be uh, very undemocratic thing, I think so. And let's talk about the I'm going to talk about the small, not direct linkage between it, but let's talk about the Spider-Man movie. We have seen the Spider-Man movie has many times has lot of different characters has changed, and actually it got a lot of popularity, not because just of one character, but also due to there are many characters are came across it. And I think it is important for improving representation. So if we are unable to improve the representation, then it is going to be long term, there is going to be hijacking of the industry, I think so. And there are a lot of people who are actually not going to able to hit the industry which they have to be do, and the representation is going to be down by down, because if the uh, kids of the higher superstars is going to be in the top level, and this trend is going to be long and long, because they actually they actually prefer to taking those students or stars or kids which actually are the kids of the superstars, because they actually know how to controlling the industry. And in and due to this, the representation is going to be affecting in a very large number. uh, we are talking about there are many things happening in our jobs also, but in the media industry, is there is a need of creating this type of group which are actually going to helping it, because if we are unable to do this, then this is going to be create a lot of problem, not only the not only the in the country, but also between the people, because they have also right of representation. We have there are many types of reservation also available in the jobs. I am talking about in India, there are a lot of reservations available for the people,
Yeah.
job of people. But but if we are talking about the industry of films or anything in media houses, it is not available. So we can say this, we need to creating a group which is going to be for the underrepresented group, and this is actually going to be helping it. So thank you.
Thank you for that speech. I think for POIs, just interrupt people. Just turn on your mic and say POI, because otherwise people might not notice and so forth. I've done this before and it's worked fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
So in that case, opening opposition.
Yes, here. So like, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome from the opposition side of the house. We want to start our case by re-engaging the definition by somehow mentioning that, like, when the government is uh, speaking about the effect that it will endanger, or like the effect that it will have on the global statute to just engage with like characters that are representative original characters for the new movies. We directly get to mind the case of the last movie of like a lesbian Jesus character that was released on a Hollywood movie. So therefore, we want to prove, like in our case, we will be stressing on 2 points: how this will have a bigger choice and more inclusive representation for all the groups, and second, why this why this is not harming any kind of group, and actually, as the government mentioned, it will have a wider and more positive effect to create a more social positivity overall in the globe. Because so our first thing was, how can we create a middle ground and representing everyone? So basically, when you are taking, for example, my partner will continue by mentioning other examples and to continue over our case. But let me just give you a small example on the already mentioned Hollywood lesbian Jesus character. So basically, it's including both the LGBT minority, and it is including both also like the Christian community. And when you go into the Christian belief, they are like, no one can judge me, and like, don't judge the others like you're judging yourself, or don't judge like in general, because only God can judge anyone. So basically, it's like breaking the stereotype of homosexuality being a taboo in the society, but also making it accepted by one of the major or critical symbols of a certain community, which is Christianity, one of like the most forgiving and accepting communities. So the thing is that, like, when this is how we, as the opposition, we think that keeping the original characters, not creating new ones, will have a wider impact on the society overall. And also, we want to hit on the point that in the government's best case, when they would be that, well, it is hitting in the religious base of the people, it is hitting in the morals, in the traditions of the people. Well, traditions change. I mean, religion is staying, and religion is forgiven, but traditions shall change for a better middle ground. When you are like developing, getting out from the niches that we had previously in history and getting into a postmodern world in the 21st century, it is normal that there will be clashes, but we are all able to overcome these clashes by settling a middle ground. This middle ground is obliging us to have some sacrifices. Sacrifices will not be getting rid of your religion or getting stripped of your religious identity, but just becoming more forgiving and more accepting of others by accepting that, well, there can be homosexual people in my society, for example. And by that, like, religion and homosexuality are not something like against each other. We have seen many examples in history about bishops or clerics having like homosexual tendency. And even in the Greek belief, homosexuality or like even the love for the same gender was one of the highest ranked or the highest levels of love in the hierarchy of the definition of love, actually. So the thing is that, like, what do you get from our side as an opposition for the moment is that, like, keeping the original characters into when you are filming your movies will allow you to create a middle ground and represent everyone at the same time, and also create a more positive atmosphere for the overall, like, you know, dynamics of the world, how the social dynamics that work, like, because religious people will be accepting of homosexuals and homosexuals will be accepting of religious people, and they will be like, for example, in Turkey, just a day ago, like, there was this thing that was like, well, Hagia Sophia or like Hagia Sophia will be reopened again as a worshiping place for Muslims, but that was not including that it will be closed for tourists. No, it will be both opened for tourists at the same time, so they can visit that place and have like the touristic side of it and have pictures for their Instagram or social media, but also be open for worshippers. Therefore, we can see that, like, having these characters will not harm anybody, but will urge people to be more accepting and more forgiving for each other. And also, like, when we took the government for their best case about traditions, traditions are not right most of the time, because traditions, when you define tradition, it is built over what a certain group in their historical niche were accepting as being right. When they're, yes, I can take your POI.
Okay, thank you. So you're talking about that we will implement it among religious people, that in religious people no one can judge another people, but I can't really understand.
Okay, I get your point.
Exactly.
So
what
the
is
thing
the
is that,
mechanism
like,
of
okay, let's take religion to its core. I mentioned, okay, so the thing is that, like, when you are taking religion to its core, it is based on forgiveness, on peace, on accepting each other. But it is like, as we mentioned, the historical development of tradition changed the religion from being accepted, as we mentioned already. Verses of Bible, of Quran, of Torah are like, no one can judge aside from God. I'm not someone who's religious, so I cannot give you the verse completely, but that's the meaning that we get from verses according to history. And also, like, well, if religion is considering that, like, if some religious people consider homosexuality as a small example, as being a taboo, then even, like, psychologically speaking, psychology in DSM-5, like the Bible of psychologists, it's homosexuality is not a disorder. It is something innate in us. It is in our nature. But, like, the psychodynamics of our development from early childhood to adulthood is what make us choose. We are all homosexuals and heterosexuals and bisexual and pansexuals at the same time. But it's the way we developed throughout the years, our experiences that lead us to become either this or that or both at the same time. And also, like, so what do you get from the government side, from the opposition side, is a better middle ground, a representation for everyone, and creating a more inclusive world, as the government has mentioned in our favor before. That's it for the opening opposition. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. And opening government.
Hello. Thank you very much for your comments. I must say that your argument that from one point you told that homosexuality is a taboo in society, and therefore showing characters which are homosexual is creating additional pressure to the society. But the thing is that society is a subject to change, and it was not always like this. As you know, there are 8 countries in the world where homosexuality is considered to be subject to capital punishment. And of course, as we are think of ourselves to be a modern society, we are strictly opposed to this. Therefore, and as you know, it's very much forwarded by religious views and religious organizations of these societies. For example, in Saudi Arabia or Nigeria, it's motivated by this. And as we are living in 21st century and we are trying to live in as a society where everything should be more tolerated, and we are against violence at all, we must include these characters in movies, because we must influence the society so that it changes their attitude, which initially was, of course, motivated by religion. But as you know, Christianity is changed our view on the homosexuality and on the sex in general. The Pope a few years ago officially showed that sex is no longer taboo, but it was for a long time. And at certain times in it, women who showed like open sexual behavior was burned, actually. And so we must therefore include these characters in movies, especially as opening government told already, because we want, from one point, we want to influence the society. From the other point, we want to make these underrepresented groups feel better, because we want to be truly democratic. Yes. Do you want to say something? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the thing is that, like, yes, what you're actually saying is pretty much happening in our case, but we wanted to understand why do your government want us to not keep original characters in the movies or in media?
Because we want to change attitudes towards homosexuality, towards these underrepresented groups, because we know that our initial stage was violence against these groups, and we no longer want to have this kind of behavior towards these groups, because we live in 21st century. If we want to feel ourselves as modern society, as tolerant towards all the groups, because it's actually reinforce the development of innovations and diversity and all of this. Therefore, we want to have non-violent society and attitudes in our society towards these underrepresented groups as tolerant. Therefore, we want to avoid this very strict black and white judgments on the groups and on the people because of their behavior, because actually they have the freedom as human beings to behave as they want. Therefore, as we live in not like clerical, we don't want to live in something in some old kind of society where there are lots of taboos and the power is based on the violence towards certain groups and to giving all the sins towards them. But we actually want to be mindful and to be clear in our um, messages towards society. Therefore, we must introduce new fictional characters from underrepresented societies, from underrepresented groups, in order to improve attitudes in our society towards these groups. And I think that I'm running out of time, but you also told about clerical case in Turkey with regard to Sofia, and but we can see that these attitudes are not actually improving the situation in Turkey. You know, the interest rates, it's the currency, everything is just compare Turkey and US. In one country, it's becoming more religious. In the other country, it's more secular, and the quality of life and in these countries comparable to the side of US.
Time.
Yeah.
I said time.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you for that speech. And opening opposition.
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'll be starting now. So I'm going to start by refuting what the government said, and I'll move on to support my partner's case and provide a further example. So first of all, again, emphasizing what my partner previously mentioned as a reminder, what the opposition wants, I feel the government has misunderstood us or misunderstood the motion. What the government wants is inclusive representation. We want more tolerant attitudes. We want a middle ground in the media. We want to represent underrepresented groups. And I'd like to draw attention back to the motion itself, because I feel it's been forgotten here, where the motion says the goal of improving representation in media, we want to, the House would create original characters who belong to underrepresented groups rather than reimagine existing characters. So the point here is not that we do not want to improve representation in the media, but rather that we would, the opposition would prefer to do this by reimagining existing characters instead of using creating original characters. So I'd like to correct you on that point. So first of all, I mean, like my partner said, we want, we think that important characters being reimagined has a far greater impact on the attitudes of society, because when you see it, and this is the example that I wanted to provide to strengthen his argument, Spider-Man, take Spider-Man for instance, right? Spider-Man was a white character, and the kids growing up from different ethnic backgrounds who used to watch Spider-Man felt like Spider-Man could only ever be white. And you know, like if there's a costume party or it's Halloween and you're a brown kid and you dress up as Spider-Man, it looks ridiculous because Spider-Man can't be brown, Spider-Man has to be white. So when you create a new character, a new superhero representing an underrepresented group, I mean, that's all good, but where is the impact compared to if you recreate Spider-Man and he's Black? That is a very powerful statement. It affects society in a far more powerful manner, and the opposition believes that this is a far more effective method in representing underrepresented groups. Furthermore, I'd like to turn to what, I mean, the second speaker of the government was saying. I mean, you really helped me out here. Societies, you said, are subject to change, and we want people to be more tolerant. We have to include these characters, influence society, change their attitudes. Yes, the opposition agrees. We have to include these characters. It's simply, the method is that, I mean, when you create new characters, first of all, there's also a side point that I like to mention. A side point is that when you create a new character, you're sort of emitting the history and culture and language and all of that of a underrepresented group. So for example, if you have an ethnic minority, creating a new character is sort of, I mean, when you use an existing character, it has its own story. It's already an existing symbol of social existence. It's an existing part of the social fabric. And when you recreate it and you form it to include these minorities, and you reform it to include these other values, and to have a more open and tolerant attitude, that sort of, it's a bigger statement, because you're saying that, I mean, this is something real, this is something that's part of our society, this is not something new, it's not just a figment of someone's imagination that I'm going to weekly put in front of your face and ask you to accept this, this group, right? So yes, all in favor of modern society, all in favor of democratic society, all in favor of nonviolence and tolerance. We simply, again, the motion, I just wanted to draw importance to that, would like reimagined characters instead of original characters. The point also that my partner mentioned, where this is also kind of a middle ground. So when you create a film, for example, a film, and you have the superhero is just belonging to like one underrepresented group, it's less inclusive and less of like a middle ground than if you have a character who's, for instance, appeals to the LGBTQ plus minority, appeals to the Black community, appeals to so-and-so, maybe he's religious. I mean, this is like a middle ground that sort of not only represents underrepresented minorities, but also brings them together, because these minorities can all see figments of themselves, all these communities see figments of their community within this one character, and it sort of, it unifies them in a sense, because they can all connect through that character, they can all find an appeal in this character, and it really brings people together. So so those are the main points. I'm gonna just reinstate that, yes, the opposition agrees with the government, we want more tolerant attitudes, etc. But we just want reimagined characters instead of original ones, because it's more inclusive. I mean, you can have different aspects of different groups, different religions, different movements embodied in one character. It has a far more powerful, positive impact on society. It's more of a middle ground, and it brings people together. It encourages members of society to accept others when they see a figure that they're already familiar with, a figure that they already know, having another aspect or another quality that comes from elsewhere, maybe a foreign quality, but then they're like, oh, this is us and them together in one character, and this is something that we can learn to accept, and it encourages that kind of attitude. If there are no POIs, I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. And to open the closing side of this debate, closing government.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start. And okay, so let's introduce the context of the status quo. So we believe in the status quo to make a lot of campaigns in order to increase the diversity and increase the representation of different races, of nations, of sexes in every field, actually happening a lot. Like a lot of movements, a lot of actions are made by some production companies like Marvel, by Sony company, and so on and so forth, because it fits into their values. Like they want to increase the diversity, they want to increase the social equality among people. And why we're talking about the media because a lot of media every year is created, a lot of movies, cartoons are created every year, a lot of it consumed by many people every year, and it is very accessible way to introduce the idea to the people, because it entertains people, and because the freedom of representing the person, for example, through the cartoon is huge, rather than, for example, just by saying to the people that the diversity is very good. And also, we believe that we are talking about only the popular media resources. For example, we are talking about, for example, the Marvel universe, or for example, we're talking about some very popular cartoons or very popular TV series, because exactly the popular TV series are consumed the most, and we will have more people to understand, to get the ideas of diversity, and that it is normal, and no prejudices has to appear and impact negatively on the other nations or races. So we believe that, okay, the second speaker of the opening opposition is talking like it is true, yeah. So through some characters we could have created, for example, by example of Spider-Man, by creating another version of Spider-Man, it would be very good. Yes, it worked in the past, where a lot of campaigns were not applied to the society. A lot of campaigns like Black Lives Matter, the campaigns about the diversity from the Marvel, where Marvel actually introduces the new women superhero, didn't happen. Why is this very important? Because exactly because of the requests of the feminist movement, because of the request of some nations, of some nation representatives, exactly because of these requests, Marvel actually created reimagined several characters. They reimagined the storylines. They specifically emphasize the focus on their gender. They create new jokes about their gender their gender identity, and so on and so forth. We believe that exactly these moments are actually creating some negative backlash from the fan base, and because this content is very popular, the fan base actually has a huge impact on the society, because the society actually respects the fan base of, for example, of Marvel, and listens to their, for example, for their opinion, because they have a lot of knowledge about this universe. Why the fan base actually reacting negatively? The fan base actually sees that their favorite storyline was twisted to the wrong, let's say wrong path, because they see that their favorite story of for example, the Spider-Man was twisted into another wrong way. That the Marvel, just to get some popularity in, for example, in the countries, for example, the USA, because of that, they are creating new storyline, they are creating new jokes, they are creating new identity of the Spider-Man. Like, for example, let's say Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man will be a gay, and fan base will react to this negatively, because they know that there was a storyline, a romantic storyline with Mary Jane, for example, that was the favorite part of some part of fan base, because their favorite storyline will be twisted, and there is no guarantee that the fan base will actually like it. There is a more higher probability that the fan base will not like it, because the fan base will understand that these actions are actually made just because to get more viewers, more money, because, for example, they feel that there is no need to twist their favorite character, because exactly the original, no thank you, and because new original character could be created in order to represent, for example, the gays in the superhero universes. We believe that this potential backlash from the fan base could create a negative impact on the reputation of the new of the new character, of the new storyline, of the new movie, because it will create some noises, some negative popularity of this movie or of this cartoon. It will create some unnecessary negative reputation of the movie that will be that will have very low ratings. Because of the very low ratings, other people who are not fan base, or for example, who are not against the diversity in the movies, who do not care about the storyline of the Spider-Man, they will see that this movie has a negative rating, that a lot of people are actually backlashing on it, or because these people see that this movie is actually about only saying that gays are good, or that the gays could also be superheroes, brave superheroes. These people will not be interested in some advertisement for example, from the Marvel, and they just do not want to watch, because the fan base of the Spider-Man says that it is actually a very bad movie, because they will see this negative, for example, reports about this movie. They will not be interested in watching this. Compared with creating original character, we believe that creating original character will not have such impact from the fan base, because they will not be the fan base. The original character could actually be created with a new storyline, which will be which will be interesting for the people. No, thank you, and which will be which will not have a fan base. It will be interested, for example, by the people who want to see and who understand the ideas that some groups are discriminated today in the society, because through the media they could see what are actually the sufferings of these people. They could understand much better the idea of diversity in the society and the need of this, and they will not be they will not have impact from the fan base that this movie is bad.
Thank you for that speech, and I'd like to call upon closing opposition.
Do you hear me well?
Yep.
One sec. So let's begin with the characterization of the existing characters which are widely spread in the famous films or cartoons. Firstly, we do think that these ones are extremely famous because they have overlived the threads of time, and they are watched again and again, and more people are involved in watching this because these characters are really famous, and the mass culture is built basically on these scenarios and the ideas of these characters. More importantly, they are comprehensible, and they are delivering the ideas which are widely spread and that are bringing the integrative field for everybody, for example, to unite, or they are delivering some notions which are positive to for developing of specific groups, and they are promoting such ideas like being equal or and stuff like that. Mostly, also they are having the positive image because they are basically, they leave the ages and they are watched again and again, and it means that we are loving the Disney cartoons, we love the Batman because they are shot again and again, and these are the characters which are basically where spread in mass culture is built on it. So we do think that they are extremely impactful because they are bringing the empathy towards the heroes which are shown in these cartoons, because you have seen this cartoon in your childhood and you have the sweet memories from your childhood when you're watching it again and again, and it means that you are more prone to be influenced by this image and by this character because you are already used to it, and we are sure that it is going to bring the positive ideas which are proved and experienced by the time, because we do think that the negative images which don't resonate in people's hearts and minds, they are less likely to survive the times, and they will be less shown again and again. So the basic profit which we get from this resolution is that we have the 100% working patterns that are going to influence people's minds, because when we have new content, and that's the comparative with the government, it's always bring more risk, because the comparative is that when we have new films and new cartoons, if they will fail and people will not like it, it means that they will be likely to discredit the whole movement in case of the failure of this film. Because if you see that this Negro person is in the role of the, for example, in the role of the new character of the new film, and you don't like him, it means that you will be basically less prone to understand the problems of the whole movement, and you will think that all other representatives of this group are behaving in this specific way, and you have this overarching comprehension of the whole group on the basis of the failure of one specific hero in one film, and it means that it will destroy the whole movement, and we think that that's negative impact. In the comparative, we have the working patterns that are likely to bring the empathy towards these people because they have sweet memories, because they actually more likely to comprehend all these ideas. Also, we do think that people are usually close to new shows and new programs. Why? Because they haven't survived the time test. So you have no guarantees that it will be interesting for you, and it means that you will be less likely to spend your time, because you don't want to spend time for some bullshit which is not interesting and which is not resonating in your mind. So it means that mostly people will be less likely to watch new ones with new characters, especially if you don't support the ideology of the minorities. So when you will well, when you will read the annotation to this film and you will see that the primary plot of this film is about the minorities, you will be overall less likely to watch because that's not resonating in you and you don't support this. So we will have no reaching the effect because we want to influence people's minds, and when they will be already negative attitude towards such films because they have read the annotation with the plot about the minorities, they won't look it at all. But when we have the working patterns, when people will understand that they will see the understandable cartoon with the famous and comprehensible heroes, they will be more likely to view it again and again because they bring the sweet memories and you understand it will bring you pleasure. More importantly, we do think that famous people involve more people, and it means that they will influence on the huger amount of people because basically they are shown more often. For example, we have the example of the film Home Alone, and it is translated before the New Year's Eve, like every year, because it has proved its efficiency, and it is interesting throughout the times, and all generations love this movie. So that brings us to the idea of the overtone window, which says that if we see something more often, it means that we are easier to accept these ideas. So when we have the famous films, which all generations love, and you understand that it's worth looking at, it means that if they are translated more often, and when we integrate the necessary notions about the minorities, for example, or LGBT movement, it means that the huger amount of people will be involved in watching all of this. So we will be able to involve more people, and we will be able to influence upon more people's minds and ideas. And about the comparative with the first opposition, about the case of the lesbian Jesus, firstly, they don't explain how to change white Jesus onto the black one, because that's not so easy, and the Bible says that he has to be black, he has to be white. But more importantly, we do think that mass culture influences way more than the religious cults and then ideology. So we say that their case is influenced only on the small amount of people who are extremely religious and who are overall less likely to understand all of these notions and stuff like that. So with it, in our case, we are presenting you the primary influence group of the young generation who are, for example, hesitating or resistant to such movements, but because of their seeing these heroes and these characters in the working pattern that translate the necessary, that will be integrated with the necessary notions and necessary ideas, we will be able to make them more able to understand these problems. They will be more likely to vote for such movements. They will comprehend them more equally. And
thank you for that speech. And to close off the government bench, closing government.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So wait a minute. So let's start. Okay, so closing opposition actually talking about that the popularity is actually a very good platform for existing characters to influence to the society and to bring new ideas of diversity and the representation of other races. We believe that exactly this platform of the popularity creates a huge risk to be a failure, and to be not a silent failure, but to be a very loud failure. So when people see that new movie of Spider-Man will be created, they have some expectations that this movie has to be great, this scenario has to be great, it has to fit to the storyline. The fan base will create a bunch of videos in the social media discussing what it's gonna be look like. They will find the screenshots and so on and so forth. They will discuss, create discussion. It will be the trending, one of the trending topics when the new part of the Spider-Man will be created. And when they will see that the Spider-Man is actually the gay, and the emphasis in this storyline is actually about that he is gay and has some boyfriend, and he has some problems being a superhero and a gay, we believe that this storyline, which this reimagined, in order to bring the diversity into the, for example, the Marvel universe. We believe this has a huge risk, and actually depends on the implementation of this idea, of this scenario, and actually huge obligation on the people who will create this content. We believe this is a huge risk. The discussions will be continued after the failure of the exhibition of this movie, after the premiere of this movie, and many people will discuss that this is actually very bad, that the Marvel universe actually created some disgusting storyline which is not interesting, which do not fit into the storyline, and which was not approved by the fan-based community. When the opening opposition says about, for example, the Black Spider-Man, we believe this example was actually created by the fan-based community, and it didn't get the harm from the fan-based community. As my partner said, the fan-based community is very important because it actually creates the opinion about this movie. It creates the opinion, and it recommends to other members of the society that you should watch this movie because it is interesting, or you should not watch this movie because it's disgusting and tries to sell you some ideas which you will not like probably. We believe it actually, in their world, in the government side, in the opposition side, it actually depends on the implementation and how fan base will actually accept this new storyline. And we believe this is a very huge risk. In our world, we believe that creating new character has no such big risks. Like, you will create a new storyline, new universe. You will create new character which will have an emphasis on having a different gender, or on having a different worldview in the society, and having another opinion about some certain things. And these movies are actually not like actually in the status quo. Many movies are actually created from scratch and become popular. Bunch of examples like the Steven Universe, Rick and Morty. And we believe that a lot of content is actually could become popular. Okay.
Note that the case of the broken expectation is not working in our world, because young generation haven't watched the original version of the movie, but because of the working patterns, they will be 100% influenced.
Yeah, understand. Yeah, okay. Talking about the young generation. So young generation is actually has the access to the social media. They actually are interested in the obtaining the information about for example, the Spider-Man. They see in the YouTube video that someone is talking about some very fancy story. They're talking about some very interesting, and which could be discussed with other classmates, for example. And they will watch this video and will discuss, for example, with their friends, talking that this storyline is not original, the fan base do not recommend us, and this film actually has a low rating. We will not go to this movie because it's shit. And we believe this is no, thank you. We believe this is legit for the children to not go to this movie, and it is pretty good reason. In our world, when you're creating original character, for example, and for example, putting it in the channels like Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon, children they know that it is Cartoon Network. They're actually bringing us some very high quality cartoons. Yes, they're bringing every year new cartoon, but anyway, we like it. We see them interesting. We see that the new storylines are actually pretty good, and they're compelling, and they do not care about the ideas because this new character actually and its characteristics are actually fit into the storyline, or the storyline is actually do not hugely tries to advertise you the new ideas. The original character will not have such barriers as a reimagining the character, because new character could be easily created, because it will not have some background materials that has to be reimagined. It will have the full freedom. The scenarist, the producer will have the full freedom to create a new character. They will have all the instruments available to create the storyline that will not be looking like something that we are trying to sell you the idea of diversity, and this is good. It will actually influence more on the people, because people will see that this storyline doesn't seem to sell you idea directly, that this storyline is actually interesting. No, thank you. And this storyline is actually compelling and interesting, and they will be interested more. They will not see negative rating on the internet. They will not see negative hype on the social media, and they will go to this movie, just try it out, because no one hugely says that it is bad. Also, we believe that on the children it will actually influence more, because also the children will not see these negative discussions about these movies. For example, the new Ghostbusters, where all the squad is women. They will not see the scandals on the news, and they will do not know that someone tries to sell them the idea of the diversity, and therefore they will not have this negative knowledge, and they will be interested more.
Thank you for that speech. And for our final speech, closing opposition.
Do you hear me well?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll start with the closing government. They say that reimagined heroes of the old stories will create negative reactions. So people will think that it is bad because it's something that they're not expected. And even new generation will read bad reviews and they won't watch it. We say that negative reaction exists in both worlds, in the world of government, in the world of opposition, equally. Why? Because people make negative comments and negative reactions because they are not ready for this new agenda. They are not ready for this equality. They are not ready to accept that feminists have some rights, that they are ready to be heroes of some fight movies, that they are ready to be represented equally with the men. This kind of people who are conservatives and who will make a bad review on the film, who will make negative comments on the film in both worlds. But what we have on a comparative on our side, we say that young generation who is not really who don't have this burden of past experience, who are not conservative, who are more prone to these new tendencies, who are more ready to accept the new ideas of feminism, of equality, and all this liberal agenda, because they live in this modern world and they are ready to absorb everything. They won't be rejecting these films with new heroes, where Spider-Man will be black, or some princess from the Disney movie will be black. They will accept and see it as normal thing. They won't have prejudices against it because they live in a current world where we don't discriminate the black, where we see them as equal indeed. But again, on a comparative with the case of the government, why the new films are worse? My partner explains you that it was just because we haven't tested these patterns, these new ideas. Bunch of new films with new agenda, especially, they just fail economically. They just fail by popularity and by any other criteria. But when we use story that tested by time, that we know for sure that will work, that people care about this. So we know about Disney movies. Each generation perceiving this story and like these stories, but new films, not all of them are that great. Maybe people will watch it for time, but it won't be popular and it won't go through the time, and the new generation won't see it. So we say that it is better when we change a bit the old story that we know for sure works for everyone, for each generation, and just tweak some nuances, like we change the color of the skin of the new hero, like we change the sexual orientation, but the main pattern, the main story that is compelling for everyone remains the same. we know for sure that people will like it. Yes, we accept that to some degree, people who are conservative and who are not ready to perceive these new ideas and who think that it is just a leftist liberal agenda and they think it is just wrong, yes, we accept that they won't accept it, but they won't accept such agenda, such new films and such liberal ideas in both worlds simultaneously. But we are working especially on a new audience who don't have these prejudices, and we have this competitive and comparative advantage when we say that these patterns work definitely. So again, moreover, when we create films that are likely to fail in the world of government, we create the whole image that, well, if I see another film cover with a, I don't know, with a black guy, I understand that, well, I've seen previous new films with the black guys that are quite bad. So probably this new film again is quite bad. So I won't see it. So we kind of create this bad loop that creates this image that new films with new agenda are quite bad, and so we just create a bad reputation for the whole plast of these films. So it's, again, we're less likely to achieve the goals of representation in media than in our world. And comparing us with the opening opposition, they concentrate, especially on the first speaker, on the religion a lot, and we say that, again, religious group is quite conservative. We don't really believe that they accept the changing of the Jesus, that he's gay or he's black, because this group is quite conservative. It's not our target audience. We don't necessarily, maybe we want to change them, but we not necessarily can change them. So we must work with the audience, with the electorate that is can accept new ideas, and we must change them. But it is very hard to change the religious community, the conservative community that is not perceiving these ideas as a new generation. They also say about that, well, we have familiarity with our hero from the childhood, for instance, and we have empathy, and we see this new hero in a new way. And we think that the same hero is both people, and so everyone can be this hero, and some kind of this logic they provide. But we think that it's not actually the true, because again, as my partner explained, that they have sweet memories of the particular hero. They perceived Peter Pan as a white guy, not a black guy. So they won't be compelled by this hero just because he changed the color, and they probably won't like this hero so much as the hero from the childhood. So we don't think it is very influential for the old generation, but to some degree, yes. What we say that the audience that we can influence most is the young generation. And because these patterns are tested by time, they're more likely to work, and this way we must approach these narratives. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So how have you usually done it? Do you want a call, like with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or do you just want general feedback with no call? Talking to like those name tags. Okay, or at least like somebody turns on the camera, preferably like more than one person. Okay, whatever. So I will give you the call, and then I'll just go through each specific clash, or like the clash between teams. So the call is as follows. I gave the first to closing opposition, the second to closing government, the third to opening opposition, and the fourth to opening government. And the particular split between the first and the second was basically a coin toss, and I imagine that a different judge might have it different ways. And so I will get to that, and I will try to explain like what you can do to make it more clear. But I will start going from basically chronologically. So OG versus OO. The problem that I had mostly with OG is that you're being very general. you're saying that you get more tolerance, but how? How will specifically creating new superheroes get you tolerance? Because you're giving me a general case for movies lead to more tolerance. First, but you have a more specific task, right? You have to just describe how I will create a new action hero, like who hasn't created ever before. Say like it's like a Black woman. What does that do? How does that specifically lead to greater tolerance? I think the way you can do that is, and something that I think most of you were missing is describe and be much more micro specific about what does the viewer experience? Like what does it do to you if you are, say, a woman who goes to an action movie theater and sees another woman like kick ass and be really good? And like describe it from the perspective of an individual. What does that do to them? But also what does it do to lots of other people? So say you're a general fan of action movies. You're like just an average dude. You don't really care about feminism, but you're also not like actively a sexist either. And then you just want to see an action movie and you just go randomly into a movie and what you see is a woman being really good at action and like being really powerful. And what does it do to you implicitly? How it makes you much more open to the idea that maybe women can do this. It makes you much more open to the idea of maybe next time going to see a woman do this like in a movie that's more explicit about that. So describe to me on a micro level, what does the viewer experience when they see that movie? And what does that do to them? And as a consequence, what does it do to society? Because you make a massive leap here. You say, I go to the movies and I see the kind of movie that you like, that you want me to see, and then something happens and then society becomes more tolerant. But you have to be very specific about what is the effect of movies on people? Where does that effect stop? And what specifically about that movie makes you change your mind? So for that reason, I thought that OG was just way too general and I wasn't getting those links. Comparatively, OO, I think, was more specific in what the motion told them to do. I got two things out of OO. First of all, how it gets you to bridge gaps between communities, the lesbian Jesus movie example, which I haven't heard of, but I like noted it down. I'm going to try to find it because that seems like a really good idea, but whatever. I'll just noted it down that seems like a good movie. Anyway, so argument number one, you can bridge gaps between communities. I don't think it was explained at all, but I think it's a good start. And then secondly, how having a character that has a pre-existing canon around them who is already famous, how changing that character is much more powerful. So I think this does already beat OG because it's much more specific in what the motion tells you to do. It doesn't just explain why a movie makes some people more tolerant in some amorphous way. It is very specific. You know, if you have a movie that attracts both religious people and, say, the LGBT community, both have some reason to go and watch that movie, hence both are more likely to at least somewhat accept each other because, I don't know, they see each other in the cinema or something. But I think in both cases, it has to be, again, you have to be much more specific about the mechanism of how that happens. First of all, bridging gaps between both sides. Like, just because there is a movie that theoretically could appeal to both sides doesn't mean that both sides are actually going to watch and see it and actually going to change their mind. So you have to be very specific in the links that happen in between. So, I mean, the lesbian Jesus, I think, is like a hard example because, I mean, it's really tough to believe that people will like it. But if you have like a more moderate version, say you have, I don't know, Black Spider-Man, right? You know, there isn't like an inherently strong hatred between Black people and Spider-Man fans. And both sides have a reason to go and watch that movie. And what does it do to you as a viewer when you really love Spider-Man and you show up and you see a lot of people who you otherwise wouldn't see? So like, just describe the communal experience that happens when, I don't know, you go to the YouTube trailer of this new Black Spider-Man and you see lots of like Black people commenting. And what does it do to like bringing these communities together when you go on Reddit and now you have like a fan thread about this and you have both sides discussing? So show me on a micro scale, what does it do? How do these two communities come together and how both of them change their minds, at least to some extent? And you can just explain it through just the fact that you're more likely to meet that person from the other community on that screening, more likely to interact with that other person in a friendly manner. If in all other aspects of life you might hate each other, but now you have something to talk to them about if you're like sitting on a plane with them or something. So show me through like these micro level examples of how you bring these two communities together and how just through contact, they're more likely to get along. And secondly, the point about how it's much more powerful to have a pre-existingly famous character change, I mean, gender, sexuality, whatever. I think this was a really interesting point, but what you need is, you kind of just say it's much more powerful, but then you sort of move on. But I think, again, think about the perspective of this individual viewer. Like, what does it do to you if you already really love Spider-Man, you always wanted to dress up as Spider-Man, but you've never been able to, and now you go to the cinema and see that character be portrayed by someone who's just like you? Like, just explain to me on a really individual level, like, what does that kid feel now? And what does it do to them when now they have someone they can be proud of, someone that they can be like happy to go and see? What does it do to their self-esteem? What does it do to their feeling of belonging in society? Just, you know, don't just tell me it's powerful. Describe to me the feeling that you get as a kid. I'm sure like most of us have had that feeling when we watch a movie and we were like, oh, this is, holy shit, this is so cool. Just explain it to me from the perspective of a kid who's never felt that, and why it's so vitally important. Because, you know, it's kind of a low impact point. You know, some kid is happy. Explain it to me why it's so important that that kid is happy. Why that kid otherwise might not have anything that they're proud of. Otherwise, they live in a community that, you know, is oppressed. Maybe, you know, life is shit. Now they have something to look forward to and something to show that, you know, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Whatever. Just explain it to me on a micro level why that kid being happy is so important. So that's OG versus OO. Now, CG versus OO. So the reason I think OO, while has the start of these points, I think, as I said, it's lacking mechanisms as to, you know, it is possible, you can happen that these two communities will come together, but they don't explain why it would. So, you know, fill in those gaps, as I said before. And I think the precondition for lots of the benefits of OO is that people actually go and watch these movies, which is what CG disputes and is quite effective. So from CG, I think CG shows that the precondition for OO doesn't happen. It doesn't matter, you know, if a movie can theoretically be like really good for minorities if nobody goes and watches and sees it. And I think this is something that OO needed to already kind of assume that this is something that, you know, the prop is going to talk about. So you have to have something about how there's always enough viewership for those movies, just by the fact that these minorities tend to have like, just, there are a lot of them. And just by the virtue of their numbers, there will be people who want to see it. But CG, so basically by proving that the precondition for OO doesn't exist, CG takes it over OO. Now the toughest clash for me to judge here is CG versus CO. First of all, because you just do not respond to each other. Like, the only response I got was from the closing opposition beginning of your speech, like some like 1 minute response, which I think was pretty weak as well. So you have to respond. Like, you have to respond way earlier than within like the first 2 minutes of the last speech. So that was one of the reasons why it was pretty tough to judge. It was basically a coin toss because you both like gave really good analysis and really good points, but they were just basically standing like these two stacks of mountains, and it's up to me to choose which one is higher. So CG versus CEO. CG told me two things basically. One, people won't watch these movies. I think the explanation was really good about how, you know, people have preconceived expectations about what these characters are like. They're already committed to them. Basically, all the reasons why OO said that it's so powerful are also the reasons why, you know, you get really butthurt when you really love like white Spider-Man and suddenly it's a black guy. So secondly, those new movies comparatively are more watched because they don't have these preconditioned expectations. It's basically a blank slate. You have no reason to like hate this new character because you've never heard anything of them. CO says, not responding, but by building like a second tower next to CG, people will watch these movies because of the pre-existing fan base, because they're cult movies, because they're associated with childhood and happier days. And, you know, even if you might not be super happy about the fact that Spider-Man is black, you're so committed to Spider-Man that you'll watch it anyway. Whereas making a new movie is much riskier because it might tank, and then if it tanks, then kind of nobody will ever make a black superhero movie again. At the end of the day, I gave it to CEO mostly because they responded to CG and they said, you know, CG says people won't watch it, and that because there's backlash. And then CO says, well, I mean, there's going to be backlash on both sides. There are always going to be people who will be angry enough not to watch it. So that's kind of a wash, but at least on our side of the house, there is this pre-existing fan base that will watch it anyway because they just love Spider-Man so much. And that's like a really, really small difference, I think, in a, you know, I can totally imagine another judge flipping it, and just the way, as I'm explaining it, I'm like, maybe I might even want to flip it myself. It was like, if I had more time, I might give it to CG. So very, very small difference. So I think instead of like arguing about which one won, I would just point out a few things that both sides, a CG versus CO, could do better. So I think the problem, my biggest problem with CG is that you don't actually have like strong positive matter. Your entire case is basically just pre-rebuttal, right? You just talk about how their movies will not be watched because people will be angry and there will be backlash. And because their movies will not be watched, at least our movies will be comparatively more watched. But you don't actually give me something that is like uniquely positive, a positive case on your side. And I think so that was kind of one annoying thing. Like, tell me why the risk, like you say that making this unique new movie is risky, but it could be good. So then tell me about the good. Like, what is specifically good then about having this new movie, which might not be like as popular, might not be as like, it might not be like super Marvel, but it won't be tanked and it won't get massive backlash. But then tell me specifically, why is it so cool? And I think you mean you have Black Panther. It's so weird that nobody mentioned it. Like, Black Panther is the example of a new movie, not like changing anybody's gender or race or anything. And it was super famous. It got like an Oscar, and it was like one of the most grossing films of that year. Just tell me, what does it do if you now have these kinds of movies that, you know, nobody could attack Black Panther for like corrupting my superhero, because that was just what Black Panther was like anyway. It was a new character. So just tell me specifically why there's a positive benefit that comes from it. And I think another thing that you could have talked about is when you talked about that backlash, the only impact you gave was that less people will see it, which is kind of, it was good, but it was kind of mitigation, right? It's mitigation of benefits of opposition. But I think there's a unique point for you, which is that what does it do to you as a minority when you see all of this super public hate for people like you? Because, you know, you say what is unique about making like Spider-Man Black, unlike making a new Black character, is that whatever happens with a Black Spider-Man is going to be much more public and much more vitriolic than whatever happens to this new unique character, which means it's going to be more people who will see like all of this horrible hate online. They will get like racist comments on Instagram. Just think about what happened to like that one Asian actress in Star Wars, right? It isn't just that the movie tanks, it's that you as a minority who goes on Twitter, you're just gonna get like floods of hate. And you're just gonna feel horrible. You're less likely to want to like go and watch these movies. Also, you know, like, it just explained to me again from the perspective of this viewer why that movie tanking isn't just bad for, you know, because it mitigates CO's point, but it's uniquely bad because all these minorities that we're trying to protect now get like this flood, tsunami of internet hate because, like, I don't know, Marvel fanboys hate the fact that now Spider-Man is Black, which wouldn't happen on your side because, you know, there isn't a pre-existing fan base who would attack these minorities. So make your case not into just a mitigation of what you know will come out of opposition, but a unique case that's just standing on your side. And then for closing opposition, just be much more explicit in your clash with closing government. Closing government tells people won't watch this movie because backlash. You say people will watch this movie because nostalgia and pre-existing fan base. You say people, you know, you say there's going to be backlash on both sides, but, you know, that's kind of a given. You have to be much more open about why specifically the backlash that comes out of closing government is insufficient to completely tank these movies or to completely mean that nobody will go and see them, or you can just dispute the fact that backlash will happen to begin with, right? But just be much more explicit in your rebuttal. Rather, the only thing you said is backlash happens on both sides, which is kind of a random rebuttal. And then you started talking about how, yeah, and young people, well, young people are not racist, so they will love it anyway, which kind of undermines your own point, because your whole point is based on the fact there is a pre-existing fan base, and the fact that it is pre-existing is one of the reasons people will see it. But then in your rebuttal, you say, oh, no, young people don't care about the old ones. They haven't seen them anyway, so for them it is a blank slate. So just make sure if there's a very clear clash, because I mean, CG was their whole case was just rebuttal against you, which means you have to be much more explicit and take much more time than just kind of offhandedly respond to them. So I think you kind of lucked out here that they didn't have as strong as a case, and you kind of won based on that. But if they had been much more explicit in having a more positive case other than just mitigating you, you would have been in a much tougher position because you just didn't respond. So that's it. Do you have any questions?